when my nieces were having problems, I gave them journals and I talked to them about wearing a raincoat, right? In life, you have all these people that throw their crap at you, especially when you're out there. People tend to know who you are and then they want to throw their crap at you. If you
Yeah.
wore it every day, you'd be exhausted, just like that doctor who's a surgeon telling people bad news. He doesn't wear it. If you have an imaginary raincoat, in the afternoon or in the evening when you go home, you take off that raincoat, you take a hose and you basically wash it off and you get it ready for the next day. But you give yourself a break.
Welcome to the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast, episode 113, part 2, with our guest, Jill Barnett Kirshenbaum. As Jill and I continue our conversation from last week, we discuss her passion for raising more women up to be seen in the financial world and empowering them to be in those positions, as well as her investment in cancer research and funding for the Israeli Cancer Research Fund, as well as sharing her life experiences and observations with the world as we know it today, and her concerns for the outcome that is concerning all the way around. So pull up that chair, grab that coffee and cannoli, because here we go. It is interesting. I just had this conversation about, I'm not capable of sitting there staring at my navel. I may not feel like I'm moving forward, but I know that every step is a little bit of walking into the piece of clay that I've been sculpting and
Right.
go, Letitia, off here. It's called a living sculpture. That's how I look at life. Do I want to be further ahead? I'm really happy right in this moment, and it's interesting because one of my many takeaways is my mindset has always been the thing, and for all of us, it is the thing that determines our experience, our decisions, our taking action. Whether it's a cancer journey or being a child at a summer camp or pulling up that sail to learn how to windsail, or how you step into finances and pave a path or make a decision to be a mom. And I think that people don't realize to a greater way, because they don't, like I said, they don't pause and they don't take the mindful approach to the why and how to stay present and how to stay in the now and how to embrace these moments to moments, no pun intended, and the importance of how as well taking action is the key to solving your problems and not sitting in your why me bullshit. Because it's super easy to do that, but what does that solve? And, it's interesting you mentioned the actors writing the books, for instance. I've always been a big believer of multiple streams of income. I found my yeses to be more powerful than my nos.
Yeah.
I found this to go back to curiosity and determination. I didn't know how these things were going to turn out, and they're still going and growing. And I just know what my character is, which is curious, always like to win. I'm not in competition with you. I'm in competition with me. You might help me strive for greater. I don't doubt that. And as I hope I do with you, but it's not a competition. And I think that you saw that as a kid, the way I provided environments where everybody had the value. It wasn't about, oh, everybody should win the blue ribbon. No, it wasn't that. There were different situations. Everybody earned what they deserved through their hard work and efforts. but I definitely felt like everybody should be included and felt valued. So I know that that's, always been my approach. And so I think going back to taking action on multiple streams of income and my mindset and what I have always tried to lean into is look at there. I can look around and go, oh my God, I wish I had, or oh my God, I wish this, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in the moment. Like you're exactly supposed to be in the moment. And I have nothing to be ashamed of, or nor do you. If anything, extremely proud. And yet I know that there are environments that it is a competition and it is ego driven and it is all these things. And I think what I've chosen to do in this moment is to go, okay, let's just call it spade a spade. I'm alive and I stayed alive, not only just through this experience, but a few others that could have been challenging and stopped me in my steps. Haven't. And I'm very grateful. And with that said, it's funny you said something earlier about I don't know anybody who doesn't have something to unpack in my Louis Vuitton hard, cases in the corner. It's so funny you said that, Jill, because I was like, all of a sudden, I got this image of the Louis Vuitton trunk, this great trunk. And I was like, I always wanted that piece. And I was like, oh, interesting.
I got it.
I got it. And now I can say just a sweet little cross strap bag. And that is, it's so funny to me because, and it is, life is comedy, right? And you have to laugh at you have to be willing to laugh at yourself and experience, because otherwise it would be too much in most cases. But I was being
I don't
interviewed.
know. Yeah, I don't know if it's nervous energy that causes a laugh sometimes in the hardest parts of the world. Like when you have a very difficult moment in life, or when I do, I tend to start laughing because of the absurdity of it, or the craziness of it. I remember having, so I went in to give birth to Ty, my youngest, and the girl gave me like a full push of Dilaudid, which is a street drug that is similar to heroin. And I'm 5'2" nothing, and she decided to give me a full. She said, "You look strong." I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I ended up throwing up for about 4 hours, every 20 minutes or less. I mean, after being hypertensive too, that was crazy. And they didn't know what to do with me, because until I could get an epidural and the baby wasn't traveled far enough down to, do that, I went from the NIC, like the triage area, in a chair, wheeling me up to another area that was more quiet, and then they put me on a bed, and then they took me off the bed and they put me in another chair, and they just tried, and I was running around with a bucket. At first it was just like a little bedpan thing, then it turned into like a whole like industrial tube, and like it was, I started cracking up. I'm like, there's nothing left in me. How do I even
Your childhood with your father's boat that prepared you for these moments.
I had my own bucket then. I had my own bucket in triage. Like it was perfect.
Yeah, that point. It's interesting because getting back to like the unpacking the bag or that kind of experience and how you power through, it is all in your mind. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everybody's mind is impervious to overcoming. No, but I'd like to think so. And I think that that's why mindfulness and rewiring one's brain is such an important healing tool, and where it all begins. It all begins with our mind and our attitude of how we're going to go forward. And you could have very easily been like, I'm out, or I can't do this, or I'm not capable. And instead, yeah, okay, your body was doing what it was doing, and you, like you said, went with the flow as you do in your life. You have to, I always, and it's interesting because of camp, for instance, I've always had this image when it comes to flow, visualization, where it's like a stream where you can hear like the lapping of the water and the rustling of the leaves, and you can hear the birds singing, and you can just hear and smell the air. And you know, like you even know that there's like a beaver building a dam, and there's just like all these blissful, balanced tundra experiences. To me, that is flow. And that's the application to just going through all things, no matter what one is faced with. That doesn't mean I don't have a knee-jerk reaction. It means I try to have a more in that moment, because there's plenty to like have your, moment of overwhelm. And yesterday in this interview, as things got more revealed unintentionally of the, I've had this experience, or I've had this experience. I mean, literally the interviewer was like, I think she was practically like, what the fuck? She was like, I think I don't know if she thought she was supposed to feel sorry for me. And that is just not who I am or where I come from. And this is what I said to her. I really believe that, I think this is what I said to her. I really believe that these are not experiences I've gone through as a victim. I've gone through these things so I can become a teacher to these moments, to show people how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic, how to hear another side of the story, how to know that a woman who is in a domestic violent environment, or a woman going through cancer, or a child coming up through a series of traumas, how this may apply. Yeah, it may sound a lot to you. To me, it's another day. And I'm not asking for more.
The road is bumpy, but I think people forget, I
Yeah,
think people forget. I think they just kind of go on life's highway and they just don't pull it back. They don't unpack that bag for anything, and they just keep going. And people who charge through in life and end up not feeling good about it, there's a lot of history. That's why therapists exist. And I'm telling you, when I was 4, I think I went to the first therapy session. And I remember 5, I was in 6, I was in kindergarten. And I remember the therapist saying, you learn in poetry, right? You learn in rhymes. What if you were to write your feelings in poetry, in rhyme, right? It was a distraction from what was going on in my head to actually put it down on paper and write.
Yes.
This is the book. And this book, I started writing when I was 6 until 30 poems.
I love that. Excuse my dipping, charging.
And
brilliant.
And is that what I'm unpacking all the stories from? I'm interweaving these poems.
I love that so much. So is that like one of your original journals, so to speak?
Yeah, it's old. It's it's at least 45, 44 years old.
Well, I think the writing is such an important tool. It's one of these things right now. I've been reflecting on my life experience and how do I give back, and how do I take all my life experience and my professional understanding of things and wrap it up in a bow, so to speak, to bring value to other people and an offer. And it's funny you should say that, because again, I look to my mom, who was an English teacher, journalist, had her master's, and always said, Felicia, of all things, please God, write. And I'd be like, I was already, knee deep in what I was doing, and she really couldn't stand that I went this direction. She thought I should have gone from Wall Street to CAA agency. And I mean, of course, God love her, for her vision. And I appreciate it, because I would have done that, frankly, if I had the money, but I didn't have the money. So that's why I went, after pre-med and not being able to see that through because of money. And, lucky that I had my education, but I had to pay it back, which is why I went to business school. That's my story. And nothing to do with not. I mean, do I think I'm smart enough? Well, I'd like to think I'm capable, but I don't know that that would have been the right road. And if it was the right road, I would have done that road.
Right.
So it is what it is. I want to talk about you and further on down your road. So, how did you end up deciding that you wanted to go into finances?
Well, first of all, my toughest subject in high school that I didn't do well in was math. So naturally, I wanted to be in finance. I have a
Genius.
challenger mindset. No, I so it's kind of funny how it kind of morphed. I said, when it comes to the journey, my life hasn't been like this. My life has been like this and around when it comes to my career. And I went to school to be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher. I'd line my stuffed animals up and teach them with my chalkboard in my room. And, that was my thing. My friends would come over, we'd do exercises and alphabet, and I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to school to be a teacher. I graduated with a teaching degree. And then I tried to get into teaching. And for 2 years, I was in a junior high. The students all thought that I was their age. I looked exceptionally young at 21. So I did that for a couple of years. And then somebody said to me, teachers really know how to speak in layman's terms and make great salespeople. And I went, really? And at the time, I had a $23,000 salary. I was waitressing at Carson's Ribs, which out here was right next to the Berto Center when the Bulls were big, and Michael Jordan would come to the front, and Bill Wennington and BJ Armstrong, and all those guys would come in their 6'9" stature to my 5'2", sit at my table, order porterhouse steakhouse and ribs and everything, and then pay me 100% on the bill because it was all cash. I could keep it. I didn't have to report any of it. So while I was making 23,000 as a, or 22 or 23,000 as a teacher, I'd change, go to waitress 5-6 days a week. I'd come back with gobs of money, stuff it in my drawer, until I could get to the bank. And I have no idea how I did it. And then I was tutoring, at the same time. So I was trying to make up for the income that I didn't have living at home. It was awful because I wanted to be independent. So I started a sales job in technology, and I stayed in that technology world for about 15 years. And then the bubble burst on technology, and, the banks started not funding anymore. It was like a whole world of crazy.
Yes.
And that's when the interest rate really shot up at the first time. And it was like just a crazy time in the 80s. And I ended up working for a company that provided, movable walls and raised floors and great for data centers and companies. And I started working more on the construction side. At that point, I had gotten engaged, got married, and ended up deciding when we moved to the suburbs to try to find something that could really accommodate, what I was doing in my history. And I didn't want to get in construction. I didn't want to get into furniture. That didn't really work for me. So I ended up joining Sandler Training, and Sandler Training was a global training and development company. They're probably one of the largest out there. And all of my clients, while I was there for 8 years, all of my clients were in finance. They were either wealth management. I had a national wealth management company that I was training, or they were in banking, so I got to understand when I was coaching them who they were dealing with, why they weren't calling them back, how they got to their finance end, like what they did overall and how they did it, and started recognizing it was kind of an interesting company, kind of an interesting industry, kind of an interesting organization. Clients were the same as I had, right? They all had problems, but from a finance standpoint, they could actually fund them, where I was just working on the inside, helping them to turn around, with their people and their culture. So I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. And I burnt out. I was working really hard at the Sandler thing, and I had, a baby at home, and I was just sitting there like, I got to find, I don't know. I hit that time. It was political stuff that was going on because I was bringing in these big national companies. And Sandler wasn't fit for that at the time. So it was very challenging, to deal with that. And so fight or flight, I actually flew. I normally would fight, but I had
Right.
an offer to work, in a finance capacity, and ended up doing that. And so I started with a small finance company. They were very kind. They knew that I could network, which is half the battle with sales, right? Where it's not just handshaking and hugs and handshakes and all that. It's sitting down and saying, okay, what are you seeing? What are you doing? How can we work together? And I started bringing in opportunities, but then during the government, funding phase and everything else, that industry kind of suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a call from this company, Briar. And Briar Capital, would come into our deals because I would fund the purchase orders, for companies to get products in. I would fund the accounts receivables, for the billing that was coming in from their clients. But if they needed more money,
Mm-hmm.
these guys at Briar would work on the real estate. And like you would go to your bank if you have a mortgage, if you want to do
Yeah.
work on your home, you'd refi in the bank and get the money out so you could do the work. I do that for, I don't know, for manufacturers
Mm-hmm.
and logistics companies and corporate structures. And so it's an easy concept, and it tended to really help because we listen to the story. I'm listening to stories of CEOs who start business every day. I love it because I'm getting to know who they are. And if I can't help them, my network is so big, and I've purposely gone out and been a gap filler, trying to find others that can do more than I can do,
Yeah.
or hit an area that I can't hit that they can. And, basically get it done so they can actually continue to grow. And I love that kind of business. Like it's really great. And so I kind of morphed into this. But yeah, my journey has been very loopy,
Well,
but I'm on the speaker circuit now, and I'm speaking at all these conventions on finance, and people are curious about what's happening in the banks and the non-bank lenders, and what the trends are that we're seeing right now, which is just crazy. So it's a crazy good time for us, but it's a crazy time in general.
yeah.
uh, a lot more bankruptcies are happening, and we just got word of two other lenders like us that ended up going bankrupt, and so we're in a good position right now to continue on and grow. So I'm honored to be a part of this. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing and so cool and so synchronistic of all the things that I'm personally drawn to. And again, even though I read your bio, hearing you speak it impacts me differently. I hear it differently. So, first off, I love how the evolution of your career has unfolded. And I love all the things you said that are super important to people to understand, like what it does take to, you can have great ideas, but at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, we're all in sales
Mm-hmm.
and we all are selling ourselves, but we're more importantly, how are we listening to, again, this is like a repetitive conversation. How are we listening to help others bring value and serve their needs? And you happen to be in an environment where you can help others either start up or deliver through whatever their ideas are, through their manufacturing, and give that cash flow, it sounds like, to keep them so they can meet all their ends and their responsibilities. Or in the end, when, whatever the application
Yeah.
be. And
Yeah.
it's, not being a bank and being a lender and being in a position where your peers, so to speak, business peers are going out and you're like getting stronger is amazing. The fact that it's led rather to you speaking on stages that people are
Well,
tripping up. What?
there aren't enough women in finance still. And
No.
so now these teams, and these events, they look for women to be up there on stage, but you see the same women now over and over again. So I'm propping up a lot of women in finance. So going back to what we talked about in my baseline of what I did as a kid, right? I'm still propping up women in finance. And anytime I see a woman in finance, when I go to these networks, I sit down, I talk to them, I find out what their world is and what they're doing and how I might be able to help them. And then I introduce them around. And I do this with new members too. I take them around. I feel like I'm a mom, right? I'm in this network. And if I see that they're new with these doe eyes and trying to figure out what's going on and within a very intimidating 6 foot tall white banker culture,
Yeah.
so if I can do it, I'm going to help them to do it. And I love that. So I've been, people have been commenting like I'm on the rise. Like I'm out there because I'm representing women and I need more, women to really step forward and be a part of this because it's an important aspect of business, right? To be able to help clients and collectively.
Well, it's everything. Finances, whether you like it or not, is the ticket to your freedom of choice, your freedom of the decisions you get to make, the expressions that you get to put out into the world, how you energetically, create exchange, your network, your net worth, and it's interesting. So I started speaking probably, I mean, camp places like camp probably gave me that opportunity to start speaking, so to speak. We never thought of it as what we know it today as speaking on stages. And I would get ironically asked, Jill, in my like late 20s, early on in my career, to go speak to like advanced art programs about thinking that they were going to see my portfolio. I would go in and I'd talk about finances. I'd go in and talk about the importance of if you want to be an artist in business, you have to have all these ducks in a row because
Mhm.
it's, you're okay here, but you can't get over here if you don't have this over there.
You'd be a starving artist. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I certainly knew that being a starving artist wasn't an option, which for me personally, and it's an interesting thing that you talk about this because I'm not trying to say, oh, I could do that. But my point to that it goes back to such basic teachings in our educational spheres that we don't provide for a child to
Mm.
understand, because whether they're getting in their household or not, it shouldn't matter. They should be getting it where they're spending their days so they can do better and be better for their own legacy
Yeah.
and for the environment of how many other people that they can help along the way. And I think that that's really huge what you're doing and how you're right. I mean, I don't have to tell you you're right because you're in it. But from an outsider perspective, and it's something that when I saw what happened when my father died unexpectedly, and my parents had just divorced 4 months before, and my father had lost all of our businesses due to the 70s recession, and I was a 14-year-old kid working on my family's business, and my father saying one day as he's doing the books, I have women on this floor who have been with us for 25 years and you're pulling in more sales than them, and that's can't happen. And I was like, really? Well, who's going to keep the roof over our head and the food on our table? And the truth of the matter, Jill, like your father wanted you to go to camp to be a child. I definitely lost my childhood at a very young age. There's no question. Not by choice, but because. I don't know any 14-year-old at the time who was making comments like that. I didn't know 14-year-olds at the time who were having a lot of conversations I was having and a lot of observations I was having. And it's interesting because I was good at math. And I could totally see how being in finances would have been like a really cool road to go down. Not because I'm not an artist or all those things, but I love and I cherish and I celebrate what you're doing because it is so important.
Mm.
And, my mom was left with an SBA attached to her house that we were growing up in, and my father with no life insurance. Well, you know as well as anybody else, you can't build a business or a household on sand. It's got to be on a solid foundation. And it took my family at least 20 more years to recover from that.
Yeah.
And I often think that with all of those environmental impacts, like we talked about earlier, it did make an impact. I'm not going to lie to you. As confident as a little girl I was, I had so little confidence because of all these ins and outs, ins and outs, ins and outs, and not a lot of positive influences around that. Even though I did have grandparents who did well and they were positive. And my point to that is I want to see for women, whether it's in health or wealth or well, emotional, mindful well-being, to create legacies for themselves, to have security, to be able to empower themselves and others, and to be a force of nature, that are more women are out there being able to teach, love, share, and be an example. And I love I love doing this platform because sometimes it feels like I'm just going like, I had no idea the most incredible, beautiful woman that I was going to be sitting across from, to the level that I am, that this is a gift, that this is a gift that I get to share you. I get to share you with the world of the why women like you make the world go around. Women like you who in many cases would be like, yeah, I don't have time for that bullshit. It's all about me. But you don't act that way. You, on the contrary, act the opposite way. And putting that wind behind that sail mentality really shows in who you show up being.
Well,
And
it's a scary time right now, right? Even to put myself out there, it's a scary time right now to be a Jewish woman in the society that we're in. And I get up and support because, for the Israel Cancer Research Fund that I'm a part of,
yes.
I feel really responsible for the success of cancer research in Israel. And 28 facilities or so, or over 20 something, and 2 Nobel laureates, and every country being represented in these hospitals who are researchers. I mean, the researchers are from Palestine, and the researchers are from Iran and Iraq, and all these conflicting countries.
Yeah.
Cancer hits all of them, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 5, depending on the type of cancer. And they all have a keen interest in finding research, to be the most impactful thing to finding cures, right? Can't find a cure
Yeah.
without the research. So,
Right.
But there are some, researchers and heads of those departments who serve for the IDF. They've had to leave their homes. There are some researchers whose family has been either killed or captured. And, when I get up and I speak to this group of women at our women's event, back even a couple months prior to this, the importance of the impact is so big. I mean, I got emotional and I just said, if we all raise, I think it was, if we all contribute $75 a piece, and I think there were 200 and some odd in the room, we can help to take away the fear of getting a call from a friend saying that they have cancer, or getting a call from a doctor saying you've got cancer. We can take away the fear of what's ahead when you get a diagnosis. And I said, if you want to be a part of something bigger, stand up with me, and there's a QR code on the table, and let's make this happen. All 220 got up. I have never been so, I mean, it was a deep breath moment. It was a amazing feat. We raised in 5 minutes more than we'd raised in years prior at this event. This was just a women's event. And we funded for 1 full year, I think, one researcher. And we just had a gala, and I brought in the Susan G. Komen organization to fund the research for breast cancer for them. And because they don't do a lot of research. And one of their honorees, who I'm lucky again has become my friend. She's incredible. And we raised, again, I think more than, and this is now after the 7th. It was scary. We had undercover police there. It was absolutely nuts. I'm out there, and I'm promoting it, and I'm standing with Israel, and I'm doing more, but I'm also vulnerable.
Yes.
And it's hard to be a little, I mean, somebody put out, the little Jews, we're just this small part of the world, and we used to be really big, and now, after all these wars and people against us, it's very overwhelmingly divided right now.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting that you say that. And it's interesting you say that from your perspective of what you are involved with and what you do professionally and personally. I've said this in most recent podcasts that have dropped, that I just happened, and it's rare, I happened to be up at 1:30 Pacific Standard Time when it was announced that Israel had gone to war due to the invasion of the kibbutzes. And I remember immediately thinking, oh my God, this is like noise in my head from my childhood. And now you can say noise in your head from your childhood. You're like a woman that was raised in Northern Illinois. Like, what are you talking about? Well, what people don't understand, possibly, who didn't have that childhood experience, and certainly most of my peers didn't. And I just had a conversation with my best childhood friend who was raised Roman Catholic. She chose to become a cop in she's part of the federal marshal system. She was literally just saying to me, not but a couple weeks ago, oh my God, I had no idea. We've never, ever had this conversation, ever. And she said, I am just so, so, so sorry. I am so sorry. I had like the sensibility. And to that point, and at the time that I was hearing this news, I wasn't putting 9/11 together at the time, because I just didn't go there. Even though 9/11, like for all of us, has its own whatever. Mm-hmm. But what it felt like for me at the time was, oh my God, like 9/11, now many people are aware of this thing that's been going on forever, but have never talked about it. And now here we are. And now you're going to hear it all. And now this is going to make you feel like you're not safe again. And for those moments in time and that reality, I remember that very next morning doing a post. I did a recording because I felt called to do it. Who am I? I'm one individual in the big pot of this billions and billions of people in the world, right? But I knew from my own perspective, being a child of the 60s and not having had much time from the Holocaust having happened prior, because it'd only been, 20 years prior, and, or 20 to 30 years prior, hearing at Temple every Sunday, practically, not every, but many Sundays, how history can repeat, how you never can let your guard down, and this was not coming from my own family unit. This would happen when I would go to Temple. And it wasn't like a fearmonger situation. It was just like, let's stay real about history.
Yeah.
So it is interesting how I have observed friends of mine feel like they can or can't express themselves, feel not heard or seen, feel like they don't know who they can, who they're, what it is hard. And this goes back to like earlier in the conversation about the unknown. It doesn't matter,
right,
who or what you are, or what you've done or accomplished. It is incredible that raising money is something that, to your point, and why I went public a year ago was, and this was what took me back to my pre-med days, how women and women's advocacy and women's health and research and funding back in the 80s lacked. And I still feel it does. And you probably have a much clearer perspective than I even do, but I just knew and know that that was how I could use my voice. My own life experience, where it was at, had so many and too many women are dying, so much so that I don't even know that you heard this story within this last week. I happened to be in an office with another female doctor, and I've said this in another interview or conversations, that she kept saying how happy she was that I had advocated, that I had spoken up, that I was seen, that I was heard, that my life was saved, and that a friend of hers who's a female doctor kept saying something's not right, no different than I hadn't been misdiagnosed for 4 months. And she ended up dying with the same diagnosis I had at the very same time, and was dismissed. Why? Because she was 36 and had no genetic history. Well, I had no genetic history, and age is irrelevant, as we both know. And the money that we need, and the systems that need to be changed, and the way we teach and the way we communicate. Like, I want to go into no different like you. I want to be speaking on stages, not because of my ego, but because I think life experience and how you teach and how you share storytelling. That's why film and television is such an impactful tool, because it entertains while it also opens people's minds, right? That's, to me, how I am, either in this format or in a visual other format. That's what I feel is my purpose. So I feel I was such an impactful counselor. It's how I tell story or how I lead. That's not an ego statement. That's just like, I imagine that's how people get affected by me, because I've got experience that I'm willing to share. What a lot of people aren't. They're too like hidden and cloaked in secrets. I'm like, here it is.
Right.
Take it or leave it. And this platform of social media has allowed for more of that. And that was never in a million years, 3 years ago, who I thought I'd become. I have been this person that you know me to be, but on a public platform where anybody you are now vulnerable. And now we take this into this current world affairs that now the world is all of a sudden aware of, that has been going on for as long as the existence of time, basically.
Right.
And right. And it's interesting to hear, I'll speak for myself. As I was being asked, how do I feel? And my response was, it's really crazy to be considered the most hated group of people on the planet when it's all said and done, because of the misunderstandings and the stories that have been told that have no relativity to a very small minority of human beings throughout the world, who have had to leave many places where they're from for just the sake of survival. And many cultures can relate to that, and yet here we are. And here we are. And I am not a philosopher. I'm not a professor. I'm not an ambassador. I'm me. I'm me with my own life experiences and my own perspective. And I knew that when I did that post the very next morning, that I was going to be coming from a humanitarian place, because we are all the same. The difference is I don't feel that people, if they're just waking up to these experiences, understand the level of the depth of this, what really is, and how really scary this is for people. No different than what occurred, and how that is such a sensitive repeat of history moment in time.
Yeah.
And why people feel so unsafe. And it does take courage to step up, and it does take courage to speak up. And I think that it makes for kind of, again, full circle of the unknown, and yet you still have to show up willingly or not. and to do good and be good and to, make an impact. I personally, Jill, would love to do more alignment with you. I'd love to figure out how we can work together more.
I'd love to.
I really would love to be a part of that and put our heads together off camera and figure out, what that looks like or how that can evolve. Um, but I do think that who you are and what you're doing is on so many different levels, from getting money for research for cancer. And it doesn't matter where in the world, frankly, because human beings deserve to be cared for and their lives to be valued, and to have the help and the support, in which takes the money to solve the problem, to find the cure. That cure comes from money. The cure comes from having the opportunity scientifically to figure it out.
In Israel, it takes 6,000 for a year, or 60,000 a year, sorry, for one researcher to work in a facility in Israel to do research. One. It takes billions of dollars, and on average 30 years, for people to get through the red tape, scientists and researchers to get through the red tape to even get a cure. I say, if Michael J. Fox can't get a cure, then what's the rest of the world doing? We did a bucket challenge for ALS. Have we found the gene? You know where they found the gene? Some guys found it in the US with the Israeli doctors. There are some beacons of hope that come from the US, independent of anything else. They work hard and they get it done.
Mm-hmm.
But in Israel, it takes them a week to set up a facility with researchers from all over this earth, and they get it done. They've advanced so far. If people have certain types of cancer, if women who are predisposed to Ashkenazi descent or Western European, is it Western or Eastern? It's Russia and
It's Eastern. Yeah.
Eastern. So if they are predisposed with the BRCA gene, the chance of survival is so much stronger than somebody who generally has a gene to survive. It's unbelievable, the strides they've made in finding cures through research. And I mean, I think it's fascinating with all these dispensaries around, and taking THC, which helps to calm the brain. What if they injected it in a cancer cell? Right? So there's a researcher who's doing that.
I think it's fabulous. I think it's a necessity. Not, I don't care how it shows up as long as it's not poison.
Right. So I just, without that, we really have no hope. So I said cancer doesn't stop. Neither does Israel with the research they need to do.
It's interesting. Go ahead. Please continue your thought.
No, but that's it. It's one of those things. So I'm holding on hope that they can continue, because if they stop, that's just, and I was watching a professor speak about what's going on with the war, and he said, both sides want to kill each other, wipe them off the face of the earth. Israel wants to kill, Hamas wants to kill Israel. He said, but if we lay down arms in Israel, what's going to happen to us? If they lay down arms in Gaza, what will we do?
Mm-hmm.
We are the peacekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole thing, if they call a ceasefire, what does that do to us?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
That's what scares me.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a ripple effect that's bigger than most people are ever wanting to pay attention to, which makes it sadly even more dangerous because, I get that ignorance can be bliss for most, but the truth is being informed is a better thing. I'd like to think, which brings me to this, current affairs. It's an interesting thing how there are generations of individuals who have no sense of history. Women have no sense of history of the shoulders they stand on, I say. They don't understand the rights that they have to be of purpose above and beyond those who led before them, and how to carry forth that flag, that pole. A lot of what we were taught at camp, so to speak, how you run something up a flagpole, whether it's a bra from the counselor down the way or whatever. You have a goal, you set an intention, you make it happen. Well, to the point of the Israeli cancer research, this is just my own personal take on that part of the world. Long before this just occurred recently, there is a sense of urgency in that part of the world. You do not sit on, now granted, I get that I'm making a very general statement, but when you're living in a very combative part of the world at all times, when you could be out to lunch having your falafel and a bombs going off right, under your feet or right, a few 100 feet away, you live differently. You live with a sense of purpose differently, or a sense of just being present differently. And I can't speak for each and every one who lives in an environment like that, but that is always the energy level of what I get from individuals who happen to be from Israel, or refer to themselves as Israelis, or Middle Easterners. There's just that sense of intensity. And I think that understanding that nothing is guaranteed from moment to moment is a matter of whether they live in a moment, life or death, or that because of the reality of like how life is unfolding now, as an
Yeah.
example. I
It's
just think it's a constant that when you live with that, you know that like you can solve a problem and be dead in the next moment all at the same
yeah.
time.
Well, people don't understand, for some people, they understand the hashtag, never again, that's been floating around.
Right.
But unfortunately, around the country, a lot of students who are high school and under, even college and under, were
Mm-hmm.
never taught about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
They never watched Schindler's List. They never really went to a Holocaust museum. They never understood that the goal was to kill every single Jewish person in the face of this earth, all over Europe. And they tried to get into the US.
Mm-hmm.
And Hitler was, we're calling ISIS and Hamas, and they're all one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Their goal is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Their edict is the same. They don't understand that from the river to the sea means they take over Israel completely. Where do we go? And in that mix of people that are in Israel, and it's not just Jews,
No.
Christians, it's Muslims, it's Palestinians.
Yeah.
So you wipe it all out. They take Jerusalem as their new, it's it's the only state, that the only part of this world, this tiny little sliver that is the same size as like Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It houses a safety for the Jewish people, but of course, in every corner around them, there are guns pointed.
Yeah.
So of course they have to defend themselves. Of course they need to defend themselves. It's heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking in every way, shape, and form, from every angle.
Mhm.
And to your point, historically speaking, and the unfortunateness of how few understand that level of impact. it doesn't mean you have to have an answer to the resolve, just the knowledge again. And I've said this, growing up as a kid because we're about, I don't know, 10 years or so apart, give or take. I think that those 10 years don't make the difference. It's the individuals younger than us that start to make it. You can see the fall off. And it's not a label or an attack, it's an observation. And how things had to change so drastically in the educational programs, what was available, what wasn't, whatever. But you can really see it in the 40 to 50 year span of people on the planet, of what they don't know, what they think they know versus what they don't know. And, being raised in a world where it was a pre-cable world. So it was a 3 network world with 3 big news programs that you didn't think of as a business, but a valuable news connector. Whether it obviously was a business, but in a way that, had it's not a different impact, but its own impact at the time. But what people don't understand is just in our own young country, the kind of tumultuous times we were raised around. Like, again, we were dealing with presidents being killed and leaders being killed and wars going on and discrimination and civil rights and women's rights. And around that was the 6-Day Wars. And around that were the Israeli team being killed at the Olympics. And things that people are like, what are you talking about?
By the way, if anybody has never heard or read about that story, that is the most disturbing since the Holocaust. And now this event on the 7th topples that. It's a constant fight for life. And it's just not fair.
Well, and again, I can't make it a collective statement, but when I know so many people who have been raised this way, no matter to what degree that they practice or don't, but it's in their lineage, and just listen, I mean, ironically, Israelis have been considered, Jewish Israelis have been considered some of the least practicing kind of like, it's a life, it's not an is or a religion or whatever. But not the truth, but the reality is there's still this like heritage, this lineage of all of our families from all different parts of the world, right? And it's interesting because I'm one of those mixed kids who's my mother was Roman Catholic that converted to Judaism, but my father was Jewish. There's a lot of people growing up that did not talk about their heritage because it was too scary. I remember it really wasn't until the 80s where people started to feel like they could kind of safely start talking about this stuff. And now kind of here we've gone backwards. And it's kind of no different than what I've observed politically, or not just but what has been like on a world kind of movement since 2016. And that's not a political statement, that's just an observation. I came back from Morocco in 2015, and I was with an actor who shall remain nameless, who was scared shitless to be over in Morocco because he was Jewish. And I was his person. And I remember thinking, yeah, I get it, because I knew plenty of Moroccan Jews who had left over, long before I had met them, but they no longer live there. So I was certainly aware of people's feelings. And I have some very close friends who are Moroccan, who are Arab, who are, they're not Jewish, and doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. But I don't understand that they may not understand what makes people, or they will understand from their own perspective what it feels like not to feel safe as well. And I think the bottom line is that's what, I in our country currently, the closest thing that people have had any kind of experience with on a larger scale, in my humble opinion, goes back to like at the beginning of the pandemic with the George Floyd and all the unexpected, unnecessary killings of Black individuals. So in our country, this is how people, in my opinion, like start to go, well, what is this relatable to?
Mm-hmm.
The truth is it doesn't matter your skin or your religion or where you live in the world. None of this should happen. And yet it continuously is going on. And to this particular group of people, it just seems to never stop because, as I said earlier, I don't know why we are considered the most despised group of individuals on the planet. It's if you weren't raised that way to think that way, which neither one of us were, and lots of us were not, if not most of us, what makes you think that we've got these devil horns coming out of our foreheads when so many have, do good things like what you're doing? You
It's
are,
not just, and it's not just us now. It's gay people, it
yes,
it's Christians, it's Catholics, it's Black, it's it's perverse. It's anybody who
and
doesn't
women,
follow
women, yeah,
their Bible.
yeah, yeah,
The most
yeah.
disturbing image I've seen on these posters is the garbage can with the Jewish star in it. And I think that's not cleansing. Do you know what that is? It's the most disgusting. They don't know the Holocaust when women and men were separated by size and strength. If
Mm-hmm.
they were strong and over 15, they went to the left. If they were anything but, they went to the right. If they went to the right, they were in the gas chamber. I just went to the Holocaust Museum and they told the story of this one girl who literally said to her mother, "Those people over there are older. I would think that you would want to be in that line." And when she went into the barracks to be with all these other people who were not her family members looking for her mother, she went up to an old woman and said, "Where's my mother?" And she pointed to the smoke coming out of the chimney. People don't know that this is what's happening. This is ethnic cleansing, which is what that was.
Yeah.
They purposely went to seek out Jewish people in a kibbutz. They purposely went to a Jewish celebration. They targeted Jewish people to exterminate them. This parallel is just so, oh, it sends shivers up my spine. It just, they
So
don't.
how, go ahead. So they don't understand is what, go ahead, please.
The colleges are really having a hard time.
Mm-hmm. I see that.
My daughter is having a hard time.
I would imagine it's extremely scary to be in a college right now as a young Jew.
The gay community
Mm-hmm.
rooting for this group that is looking to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish members who are following Jews for Peace, this website that was created 25 years ago, you can see the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, did a report on them that is literally 20 plus years old, with the sole purpose of convincing people that the falsehoods are true in their eyes.
Mm.
It's absolutely, I just keep saying heartbreaking. It's beyond that. It's disturbing. It's sad. It's heinous. it's the worst part of what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple words that came up for me: brainwashing, mind fucking.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, because that's not a ladylike thing to say, and that's not things that you would want to say on a stage, but it's true. I mean, your environment, tends to be a catalyst to who you become. If you are born into an environment that creates and speaks of hate, you are going to follow accordingly. That's how gangs arise, that's how movements arise, that's how things occur.
Mm-hmm.
And if people aren't paying attention, that's how the momentum, the snowball effect, can get out of hand. And this is really what we're announcing right now. And it takes courage to have a conversation like this, not because you and I aren't capable together of having this conversation, but never as a 7-year-old and an 18-year-old will we think we would have been having this conversation in our adulthood.
Well,
And how close to home it feels than ever, than maybe pre-your existence in my childhood. And how very real it is, and how unfortunate. And when you're thinking of how you and I connected a year ago, and it was about taking a stand for getting through and living through a life and death situation, and here we're full circling about life death situations. And what do we have control over versus what we don't. And what I want to do in our last few minutes together is say or ask, so the little girl, the little Jill, who was going through all the things she was going through, what did she envision for her future self? What was it that, so I saw and I heard about the stuffed animals with the being the teacher. What were like some of the biggest dreams? Was it that, or did she realize? Is she realizing? Is she staying true to herself? How has that turned out for you, in your opinion, thus far?
well, I am a consummate teacher. Um, I've recently been asked by my industry to talk about effective networking, which puts me back in front of a big group of people to talk about the skills around that and getting past the I'm too good for this kind of mindset, because they'd miss out on business. I did it recently and I've been asked to do it again. So I'm getting back into that teaching. I coached a kid who I've known since he was 5. So much so that he ended up doing so well in his company. He approached another company, went through an interview, and I coached him through the interview, and he got the job. And I am so proud of that because you can give people the tools, but they're the ones that have to implement, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so as a child, I always wanted to teach. And I still find myself educating people every day. And do I know everything? No, because as a teacher, you're also a learner. And I am constantly seeking
Mm-hmm.
new things to learn, best practices, other people's stories. I'm constantly learning, and teaching moments are big in my industry. New things pop up all the time and I have to, grab them and run. And I've always been that person. Anything new that comes up, I'm curious enough to grab it and see what I can do with it. And, you know, technology and otherwise, I think I've always been one of the, first ones to say, let me see what that is and see if I want to do it. And I think that goes back to my childhood. Let me see if I can windsurf, right? I want to do it. I'm going to keep doing it until I
Yeah.
get it. And
Yeah.
that I think that's the biggest thing that came out of my childhood, along with other things. But that pattern seemed to repeat itself. As I was writing my story, and I'm still writing it, I found patterns, and that's it. That's it. It's being curious. Yeah.
Yeah, and being curious, I think, is the thing that it's like a life source, don't you think? It's the thing that keeps you wanting to see more, show more, reveal
Mm-hmm.
more, do more,
Mm-hmm.
or
Well, have guts too. I
lead
mean,
the
you
way.
gotta have a backbone, and I think it's hard to develop one. You can go to the gym and keep doing it over time, and maybe develop something like a strong backbone. But I think it's getting the knocks in life and recognizing them for what they are. They're stepping stones for your life, and these lessons that we learn, even though they were crappy or they were shitty from before, they go into that bag, right? Because you don't wear them, but you can reference to them to say that lesson was one that I never want to repeat, right? That thing that I went through, it is not on me. When my nieces were having problems, I gave them journals and I talked to them about wearing a raincoat, right? In life, you have all these people that throw their crap at you, especially when you're out there. People tend to know who you are and then they want to throw their crap at you. If you wore it every day, you'd be exhausted, just like that doctor who's a surgeon telling people bad news. He doesn't wear it. If you have an imaginary raincoat in the afternoon or in the evening when you go home, you take off that raincoat, you take a hose and you basically wash it off and you get it ready for the next day. But you give yourself a break and you don't absorb it.
It's no, it's great mindset tools for success and happiness.
Yeah. I put the raincoat picture in their journals and I told them to write. That was it, my nieces. And they did. You know, I told my daughter, have one journal for bad, one journal for good. The bad one, you take a pen or a pencil and you scribble the bad stuff so that nobody could see it, right? Because God forbid she's gone one day and somebody goes snooping in a room and finds all the bad stuff.
Right.
Scribble the hell out of it. In the good journal, find one good thing that you're proud of in the day. One good thing. And write about it. And I think during COVID, a lot of people struggled with that, right? When we were all shut down and trying to figure it out. I journaled like crazy.
I journaled like crazy too, and I put a
Yeah,
lot
you
of
did.
things out there.
Mhm.
Like I heard, I literally, because we had to put our mom down 2 weeks before the country shut down, and I
Oh,
could
God.
just hear her voice going, right, 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 right. You need to tell it. You need to tell your story. Right, right, right. And she literally like sources me that way for sure. There's no question. I'm like writing for both of us. There's no question, which was also what gave me the courage to do this.
Yeah. Well, I want to reach through the screen and hug you, and I can't, but just imagine I am. Because I love seeing you.
Well, feeling the feeling is mutual. It is like, I may have been your camp counselor, but I feel so proud. It's not a word that I tend to use because it's like, oh, it's so weird. You're so proud. But I am really proud. I am really inspired to sit in front of or sit with an extraordinary human being who has such a huge heart and who has so much love and experience to share professionally and personally, and that your perspective and your curiosity and your determination really, I hope, for many who hear this, gets why you are inspiring, and that it doesn't matter what we're faced with, it's how we show up and take action, which sounds like, okay, we've said that at least a half a dozen times in this 2 hour conversation, but it doesn't change the formula. The formula is what it is. It's whether or not you dance with it or you don't.
Mhm.
And and it's got to kind of like, it's like baking a cake. You can't leave out the baking soda. There's a reason for the salt. There's a reason for the vanilla, the cream cheese, right? Like there's a reason, scientifically speaking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is like now we've been talking about how we bake a cake through this whole conversation, frankly, and why it works or why it doesn't, or why it tastes great or why it feels not so great.
Right.
And I just love and adore you. I think that I don't even know what lies ahead. And kind of full circle goes back to the unknown. I just feel like we're supposed to be doing something, and I don't know if it's with the nonprofit or speaking or helping just all the way around, or just
You know what?
have,
It's our time to shine, and you are shining so bright right now. And I just absolutely am honored to be able to spend this time with you and to really get to know you during this journey that you've been on, and reconnecting with you. Even just to that point, I don't take anything for granted, and I'm grateful. I just, it's so important, I think, to connect. I think it's important to share the story, as hard as it may be, as difficult and challenging as it may be, as heartbreaking as it may be. Voices have to be heard, and it doesn't mean that you have to be loud. It
Mhm.
means that you have to be real, and you're vulnerable, and you're talking through what you've gone through. The vulnerability is real and very difficult. It's shaky, it's sad, it's challenging, it's getting through the muck of life is hard, but other people go through it too. And
Mhm.
if they're quiet about it, it doesn't help.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
in therapy, the more vocal you are about that experience, the more you have something to look forward to as well. And I think, looking forward to this conversation for me was enough. The fact that you get to do this on a weekly basis is enough for you. It gives you so much to look forward to, and to hear the stories, and to be curious enough to ask the questions. I'm really impressed by you, and
Ah,
I'm really honored to, like I said, be with you. And I just absolutely love you.
well, I love you, and the feeling is mutual. It's, it really is. I think that it would. I just can't wait till next time. How about that?
Okay.
Gonna
When I finish my book,
copy date.
we'll
We're gonna
celebrate.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have a copy date or something, like a
That's right.
standby copy date. Like, we can't let this kind of time go by.
No, 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 no.
Well, I just want to thank you for, taking 2 hours of your time, which I respect, and sharing from your heart, and sharing things that matter, and sharing how you're invested in human beings and their well-being, and that I'm grateful that we have you as a teacher as well as a student in this world, because the truth of the matter is we only wear two hats in the world, and that's either showing up as a teacher or showing up as a student, and we're constantly ironically switching those hats all the time,
Mhm.
whether you're conscious of it or not. That is the truth, that is a fact. And in regards to vulnerability, I think I personally have always been willing to be vulnerable. And I want people to understand that being vulnerable is not being weak. Being vulnerable actually takes more strength.
Mhm.
And that's not patting my shoulder or patting your shoulder. It's just an is.
Mhm.
And I understand why people are scared to be vulnerable. I understand, because it makes you vulnerable. Your vulnerabilities make you vulnerable. I put out a post this morning that made me feel vulnerable. I literally picked up the phone as I was in the middle of crying, not intentionally to capture myself crying, but to talk about celebrating the reality of the entertainment industry finally getting past these strikes, and
Mhm.
what that will do for many people, even though they might not even have a clue how they're going to pay their bills.
Right,
Just the news of the
right,
release.
right, right.
That was vulnerable.
Yeah,
I didn't expect to do that, but I did it. And why? Because I want to be a voice for my communities
yeah.
who may or may not know or understand these worlds. No different than going through cancer, going through domestic violence, being raised in a divorced family, going to camp, not going to camp, being Jewish, not being Jewish, being a woman, being a man, aging, youth, you broken or one percenter, like whatever, whoever, however you show up being. All of these stories, all of these experiences have value that for one or many is the source of what we're here to do. Ironically, with finances, I always say, Jill, our connections are our greatest bank account.
Mm-hmm.
This sources the value of what our exchange is.
Mm-hmm.
If we could, put it into the deposit of the bank, we would be very wealthy if we allowed for it.
Mm-hmm.
This to me is, being my own banker. I'm the Banco d'Italia with the connector around the pasta and the cannoli. I don't know. Yeah.
There you go.
I'll take it. But I wanted to say to you, what I love about you, amongst many other things, is you are not only a teacher, you are acting as a source of connection and a source of being an angel, and you're like a Hollywood producer in a good way, because your passion and your vision and your purpose to bring people together to fuel and source all those things around whatever their things are is really such a selfless gift that you are bringing to the table, that I applaud you for, because we need more of that. And it's, for me personally, why this last year, as well as these last 3 years since the pandemic occurred, has been so important for me to, in my own messy way, not knowing, end up having these connections, having these conversations, because one can only take so much ego and so much other kind of, focus. And I'm just so thankful that these are the kinds of conversations that I get to bring forward that really do drive, and it's such an authentic, caring, life source, why this matters kind of way. And I just want to thank you.
Oh, thank you, babe. Honestly, I'm thank you. I'm verklempt, as they say. Should we throw some Yiddish out there? No, thank you. Honestly, you just, just a big part of my day, waking up in the morning and seeing that I was going to be talking to you. I just, love you.
Love you so much. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll be in touch. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us this week, and we look forward to you joining us next week as we continue our series around powerful women who we love featuring, we love sharing, and we love you hearing about. So join, share, and subscribe, because we love sharing around the campfire and gathering to connect and create conversations around people's lives who have seen and overcome and are rising up and are successful leaders in their fields and can't get enough of great conversation, because it's where the spirit is young, the soul is wise, and the life experience are vast, that we together can change the world. Much love. Have a beautiful week. Bye for now.